December 13th, 1922, in Columbus, Ohio. They tell me when I was a baby they sent me to a baby camp, so I must have been kind of sickly. I'm born and raised at 1607 Harvard Avenue, Columbus, Ohio. I went to Eastwood Elementary School, and then they kicked all the blacks out of it, and I went to Mount Vernon School. Went to Pilgrim Junior High, and then I graduated from East High School in 1940. I went to Lincoln University for 2.5 years before I was drafted in the Army. I came back, and I went to Ohio State, and then I went to Howard. Didn't finish any place, but anyway, and I came to California in 1949. And I've been in California ever since. I worked for U.S. Jail. When I first come out here, I worked as a laborer. And I suffered ever since then. They're using a jackhammer on the state capitol. We was doing some remodeling there, and I didn't know how to use it. Then I got a job with the Bureau of Reclamation, and we were surveying and inspecting power lines, 230 kV power line from Tracy to the dam up in Northern California. I've walked about every inch of that land. I got to see quite a bit of the different agriculture areas and stuff like that. And I bought a motorcycle up in Corning, California. Our headquarters, our field office was there. And I come down on weekends, and my brother Louis lived in Sacramento, and he'd give me a 26 or something Pontiac that you had to drive it with your leg around the gear shift
Flintstone
to keep it in gear. And I never will forget, I was working in Corning, California, laying out and inspecting 230 kV power lines, and one of the guys that I worked with, we bought a motorcycle, ex-cop motorcycle, and I used to drive all the way down from that ex-cop motorcycle, Sacramento, every weekend after I met Dorothy.
How many miles?
And we got married in what year, Dorothy? A long time ago. 1951, I think he is.
Look this way a little bit.
51. And we've been married ever since then. Then I left Howard and come to California and never went back. I left Howard University, and when I was in Washington, D.C., I half-owned a filling station and went to school, which I shouldn't have done because the filling station took more time in school. And then I come to California and I worked as a laborer. Then I got a job with the Bureau of Reclamation, laying out and inspecting 230 kV power lines, and I was living with my brother Louis and Janice in Lincoln Christian Center, where Louis was voice director, my brother Louis, and also the English-speaking pastor of the Japanese Baptist Church, which also met in the center facility. And that's where I met Dorthy Mitchell. And at that time I was working in Corning, California, and I had this motorcycle, and I said, anybody want to go riding with me on the motorcycle? And the only person that put their hands up was Dorothy. And we rode that thing to my nephew put sand in the gas tank, so I threw it away. I first, when I come to California, worked as a laborer because you couldn't get a job as an engineer or anything. And we put in roads and things up around, where's in Sacramento, where the prison is. Folsom? Yep, up around Folsom Dam and in that area. Then we were put the power line all the way from Tracy up above Redding. And then Eisenhower became president, and they closed that sucker down in 2 months. And I went to work for Geological Survey. And I worked there 31 years. I went from a GS4 to a GS13.
What was your title?
And once they gave me my 13, which I deserved, I retired a year later.
What was your title when you retired?
Huh?
What was your job title when you retired? Your job title.
Well, I was just a surveyor, GS4.
But when you retired?
When I retired? Oh, I was section chief in map mapping. I had 50-some people under me there with the geological. So I was getting to that. Then when Eisenhower come in, they closed down putting on these 230 kV power lines, and I came back to Sacramento, where my brother and lived with my brother Louis for a while. And I lived in Lincoln Christian Center and visit those people, and then when they thrash, we go out and help them thrash, because man, they come in at 3 o'clock and have one of the best spreads eaten you ever want.
What's thrash?
Huh?
What's thrash? What is that?
They made their own butter, and we go out and work for nothing and it get hot about 3 o'clock, so they be up at break. My mother's folks lived in Chillicothe, Ohio, which is about 60 miles southwest of Columbus, Ohio. And I never will forget my grandpa Estes taking his false teeth out. We used to go around trying to take. But it was real interesting, the culture of black
He was
people.
a minister?
Huh?
Your grandpa was a minister?
Both of my grandfathers were ministers.
Baptist?
Grandpa Estes, and then Grandpa Mitchell, he stayed with us for about a year. He was, he graduated from Lincoln University in 1877. And his story is that my grandmother took off to Canada during slavery.
Your great-grandmother? Your great-grandmother?
Great-grandmother. And she moved down to San Francisco. And she married, that's when she married a Mitchell. Henry and Louis got all kind of things of who was my grandmother's father. We think it was a French soldier up in Canada, I know, because she moved on up to Canada, and then she come to San Francisco.
Your great-grandmother.
Great,
Your grandfather's mother.
yeah, my great-grandmother. And her husband worked in a hotel, and he also imported Chinese vases and flower pots and things. And they were out here when the earthquake came, and my grandmother, great-grandmother, come down around Palo Alto somewhere. Uncle Ted, who was my dad's brother, was out here, and he lived in California for a while, and he was out here in the 1906 earthquake. And he said he walked from San Francisco down to Palo Alto after the earthquake, because that's where my great
Aunt.
grandmother lived. So she lived in the area that I'm living
Isn't
in
that
now.
interesting?
But this was a 1915 or 1905 earthquake. And Uncle Ted, who was one of the most interesting fellows, came out here for a while, and he knew San Francisco and this area better now today. He could tell us a whole lot. But he walked from San Francisco down here to be with her. She was doing housework. Uncle Ted is quite a character. He ended up in Wildwood, New Jersey, and had a wrecking yard. And never will forget, he had a 1926 orange Dodge, and he pulled up at our house with a wolf in the front seat. Because back in those days, no, it was, you had to watch black people traveling and stuff like that in cars.
People hang them up.
Another thing I want to go back to Columbus that's been real impressive to me is that we went to Eastwood Elementary School, which is about a mile from our house. And while I was in the 4th grade, it was a interracial school. They made all the black kids go to Mount Vernon School. And people that lived, and I lived about a mile from that school, the white folks that lived across the alley behind us stayed in Eastwood. And I never will forget that.
So they segregated the schools after you'd already been there?
Hmm?
It was integrated and then they segregated it?
Yeah.
That's odd.
I was in the 4th grade. And then I never will forget the principal's name was Mrs. Phelps. And she told my mother and dad that she was surprised at them because they raised some hell. And then I went to Mount Vernon School, jumping around. But anyway, it just came to my mind that the people that lived behind me, and we lived about a mile from the school, the alley across from us, they still went to Eastwood, but we couldn't. We went to Mount Vernon School. So my dad was very active in scouting. We did a lot of camping. And getting back to my childhood, my mother was from Ross County or Chillicothe, Ohio. And we used to love to go down and help them thresh the wheat, because they come in about 3 o'clock of the V2 and have one of the best meals you ever want, because all those farmers, they raised, pure cream, ice cream, lemon meringue pie. And we used to love to go down to my grandmother's because we didn't have to do any housework. But my grandmother was an interesting, always doing something. If company comes, she was needed. My grandfather on that side, Henry Estes, it's funny, both my grandfathers, Henry, he was an ordained minister, but never went to seminary school. Grandpa Mitchell graduated from what they called Ashman College, which was later Lincoln University, jumping around, back in 1870 something.
Was it really unusual for a black man to get an education like that in those days?
What's that?
Was that really unusual for black men to be able to get an education in those days, or?
Oh, you take in the 20s, black folks didn't have. Of course, I was from the north, and I thought we were smarter, but actually, the smart ones was they did harm closing the black schools when they integrated the schools in the south, because actually, those like Ella and them that went to these black schools, they were fantastic. And then when they integrated, made them, they broke up the black schools. And then when I was at Lincoln, I had this prejudice that we Northerners, and man, them rascals was flunking us out all over the place. Those that did get an education got a darn good education. Let's see, I'm going all over the thing. Let's see. Getting back to California, I first worked as a laborer. I worked tearing down the and Louis was Boyd's director there, but he was also pastor of the Japanese Baptist Church. After I did labor work, then I started working for the Bureau of Reclamation. I used to travel all over Northern California. We were very active with the organization of city of East Palo Alto. Because after I married Dorothy, we lived in Sacramento for a while, and I was a cartographer, map maker for the Geological Survey at that time. And the Geological Survey, see, after Dorothy and I married, what was it, 5 years later, moved down here to be next to Stanford, so we came from...
Why Stanford?
Well, the head guy was a Stanford grad, and he moved the whole thing down so he could be near Stanford. That's how corrupt government is sometimes. I will say one thing about the Geological Survey. We made maps, and you were able to do some creative things, like I made the first state map of Hawaii. And I realized, I always thought it was 5 islands. It's many islands. And I got into a whole different culture. They have no boundaries because they're islands. They have no incorporated cities. And then I got into the native Hawaiian, how they own land. It's completely Apuas and Elis, and you had to get into the whole native culture. And I did a field trip over to Hawaii, and I found out also, I thought Hawaii was 5 islands, and it's more or less about 60 or 70 islands, it's a bunch of little islands you never hear about, but what Uncle Sam used to use them as test ranges for things. It was one of the most interesting, that and doing the Great Salt Lake.
What would you do differently if you knew now? What would you do differently back then if you knew now what you know now in your life? What would you change in your life?
I wouldn't change much of it. I was very fortunate. Met Dorothy living in Lincoln Center, and that was something. Dorothy's brother was one of the leading Japanese doctors in Sacramento. Although Louis and Janice had a big influence on life, because Louis and Janice were very active in JCL and NAACP and the church where I met her. And I worked as a laborer, and then I went to work with Geological Survey, inspecting and laying out 230 kV power lines.
What was what was some of your worst experiences you had in life? Some of your best and worst?
best was meeting Dorothy, and the worst was being in New Guinea. In World War II, we were in a segregated army. Ended up as a sergeant, and I hated war. And living on the equator, I've had both kinds of malaria, which is a devastating illness, and there's nothing much you can do about it. Then seeing how the Australians treated the native people in New Guinea, it was awful. And then I've seen it rain 55 days and 55 nights. As I was stopping one time, I woke up and my boots was floating down by my thing. I had both kinds of malaria over there, and not only we were fighting Japanese, man. Not only were you we weren't fighting them all. What we were doing was laying out, I was in engineering outfit, laying out airports, stuff like that. But it was right on the equator. I had caught both kinds of malaria, and that's something I had to fight. And when I now again, they stopped my disability that, and Dorothy will tell you I was still having attacks. I never forget one of the worst times I had was they had a streetcar strike in Columbus when I was at Ohio State University. And I'd get these 105 temperatures, and we had old 35 knee-action Chevrolet with a cheddar clutch, and I had to drive the thing home because there was no other way for me to get home, and I passed out, and you had to carry me out of the car, which was a stupid thing I did. But I didn't like Ohio State, the engineering. The guy said, well, what are you doing? The professor, what are you doing in engineering? There's only about 3 or 4 of us. I went to Howard.
What would you like others to learn from your life?
I think that's up to me.
What would you like others to learn from your life?
I think a happy marriage is one of the best things you can do, and helping people is one of the best things you can do. I got a joy out of working and helping to organize this city. It was a tremendous experience, and actually everybody looked down on East Palo Alto. Well, I paid $10,500 for my house, and now it's worth $500,000. That's how bad an area it is. The weather here in Palo Alto, and it was a nice place. I should say, when we got married, we lived in an apartment house, and then we moved into a flat. And then the Geological Survey moved me down here is how I got to East Palo Alto. When I first got here, Clarence Neuer and I did a lot of work trying to improve the school system. The elementary school system was awful. Was really involved in fact, Omwali Satterwhite, girl replaced, we went all the way to the Supreme Court and won to incorporate as a city, which I think is a tremendous accomplishment. We had a group we called the Floating Crap Gang. And you were so uptight you couldn't live with that name. You didn't need to be with us. But we had Bob Hoover, Hank Organ, had some brilliant people that I learned a lot in organizing city of East Palo Alto.
And what was the goal of that group? What did the group do?
We incorporated East Palo Alto.
Did you work with a lot of youth in your life also? Youth programs?
Yeah. Well, Bob Hoover's always had us involved with youth. Some of the interesting things that kid I never will forget that, I got a picture here of Nanette teaching these kids sitting on my patio like this. We had good things for the kids at that time, and we had people that would work with the schools and all like that. In fact, our school system's gone down since then. And in fact, Nanette was in the last class that graduated from the high school. Now we're only getting, at that time, about 50 or 60% of the black youngsters went to Ravenswood High School, graduated, and about 40% of them went to college. Now we get less than 30% graduating from high school, and they ship them all the way down to the other end of the county to go to it. I've been very involved with that thing, and I think I was fortunate that there's a nucleus of people in East Palo Alto, like Hank Organ, Omawale Sadoway, Cecil Williams, brilliant people, all PhDs too, and were devoted to incorporating the system and trying to redo the school system.
What are your greatest passions in life?
Huh?
What are your greatest passions in life?
Passion? What do you mean by passion? What I enjoy the most? My family.
Tell us about your grandkids.
Well, I have some great grandchildren, I'm telling you. In fact, I'm glad the girl moved here and I get to meet his, but I got, 5 grandchildren, and they're all doing very well in school, and they're all different. And one of them, Sherry's oldest daughter, is a junior in Emory. Nanette's oldest son is going to a specialty school. Her youngest son he's going to be an athlete, a little athlete. Sherry's kids, they're much smarter than we were at that age. It's amazing. Girl's daughter can do all kind of drawing or writing, and she's going to go to she's in the Palo Alto school system in an exchange thing. No, not exchange, but she's going. But these youngsters they're a lot smarter than we were. Although, as I reflect on my youth, my dad was very active in Boy Scouts, and we camped out a lot, and then we go visit. We go help people thrash wheat so we could come in and eat them meals.
What was your mother like?
My mother was, she went to Wilberforce. She finished high school there. Was very active in WCTU. That's the Women's Christian Temperance Union. My father was a mail carrier in Columbus, Ohio, and he came to Columbus when Grandpa Mitchell was pastor of the Second Baptist Church, which I was raised in. And I'm very thankful for that church, because all of our teenage activities were done in that group. We didn't dance in the church, but we'd go around the corner and dance at the Mackey's. But I think it's very fortunate that we had a group, and what they did there, they would bring professors out from Ohio State to give us talks on how to manage life and what we wanted to do. And of the group, I can give you 5 PhDs.
That's really
Which is unusual for that time. And then they had this Boy Scout thing, and my dad got the highest honor you could get in Boy Scouts. My mother was in WCTU, which is a Women's Christian Temperance Union. I just think she's crazy because she's too hard on liquor, but I'm glad I didn't learn to drink it. Well, I drank some of it, but I quit.
What are some of your memories of racism?
Of what?
Racism.
Well, I try to forget it. There's no point in... When I was looking for a house down here, one of the worst instances, Willie Rhodes, who was Mormon, lived down here, and Mother lived in Berkeley, and my wife and family were in Sacramento. And something I should say there, that Jim Dodd and I built the first new black apartment house for black people in Sacramento. And then after I moved down here, he was an architect. I learned more from Jim than I learned at any college I went to. A brilliant man. And he ended up,
Black architect.
he was quite active in schools and things in Sacramento. And then he ended up being very active in his church. But he taught me more than I ever learned in school. He taught me how to go to a bank and get money. And we built the first five, it was started out at 5 units and ended up with 5, 10, 12 units. And we got, then he didn't want to run them by himself, so we sold them and I got out of debt. And I haven't borrowed any money since then.
What advice do you have for your, what are you married now, 55 years? What advice do you have for people to have a 55-year marriage?
They're very fortunate if they have somebody they can live with for that long. No, I think the best thing ever happened to me is my wife, Dorothy. She has supported me in all the things. I was real active in civic things when we incorporated. But I'm very fortunate to have lived in East Palo Alto. You had some Omawali Saddle Whites and some Bob Hoovers. You don't find people like that. Hank Organs and the process of us getting incorporated. We had to go all the way to the Supreme Court to do it.
So how do you keep a marriage going for 55 years?
Well, we've never had any problem. Only problem we have when Dorothy's driving. No, my wife's been very supportive. In fact, while I was real active, one reason I had to get out of that, I never spent any time with my family. When Nanette and Sherry were young.
What advice do you have for people raising children?
You have to be your own self. You can't be something you don't want to be. I think instead of advising children, is set an example for children. One of the most interesting things they did when I was with Geological Survey, they had never sent any blacks out to the field because they said they didn't have any who was qualified. And I said, well, send me. I'm qualified. And they sent me, and we went to, wasn't in a town in Utah, Dorothy?
Roosevelt.
Roosevelt, Utah. It's a town about, 10,000 people?
850.
850 or something like that. A small town. And our youngsters went to those Mormon schools, and they showed me what they were doing at this school here and what they were doing there. And in fact, Sherry's teacher kept writing her until Sherry stopped writing her after she left. And it made me come back and start going over there raising some hell and with the school over there because they were not doing what they should. Although I've been pretty active in the school. And, I was active in. Then Omawali started. What's the name of it? Where Grover's working now? CDI. And we've had some beautiful black men. Omawali's a PhD from Stanford. Mary Hoover's a PhD from Stanford. Although they both went to Howard for pre-stuff and didn't get the thing that I find in Palo Alto and these rich middle-class areas, people think they're better than somebody else. And when my kids was coming up, I never will forget thinking, I wish I had a picture and I can't find it, that Nanette on a cement slab out in the backyard was teaching these kids, because we were saying that if you accomplishing something help bring somebody else to come. And we would go on field trips. I never will forget. And we were out in what's the place? The big park down by Fresno. Anyway, up in the mountains, and Yosemite. And we were getting word. That's when they first got discs out, and the kids was dancing, and it was nighttime. And all of a sudden, we saw all the boys up in the trees. And what we found out later, a guy had two big hounds that he was walking. And here these guys, we worried about them getting too close to these girls. When them dogs come down, they thought they were bears. And all these dudes was up in the top of the tree, and the girls were still down there. But
And what group was that? The group you had out
yuck!
there? Youth and
Bob Hoover used to take kids out, and he'd say, I think the Hoovers has been a tremendous help to us. And he said, if you guys are going to talk, come on in here and let's talk about something. You know, we went on a lot of field trips. And,
how about your IMPS program?
Huh?
Your IMPS program.
Yeah. And all those youngsters in that thing graduated from high school. The interesting thing is now, less than 20% of the kids from East Palo Alto are graduating from, or 20 to 30%. And then they
Didn't you start a program, Minorities in Earth Science? Didn't you start a program, Minorities in Earth Science?
I helped, was on the board with the Geological Survey to expose youth to earth science. And actually, after all the work we did, I know one guy that really majored in that. And, but we also, Betty Gates and some of these youngsters, we got them jobs working with the Geological Survey. Betty Gates still, it ain't Gates, what's her name now? She married. But we got kids to be working. We did get one earth science.
Seto and Uta Okutsu Seto. I'm the last of 7 children from that togetherness. My brother Masa was born first. My mother and father were married. My father was in San Francisco as a houseboy and went up to Seattle to pick up his picture bride, Uta, and was married by a Protestant, I think a Japanese minister right then and there in Seattle. They moved down to Sacramento where they had their first child, Masa. Next is Haruo, Joe, and Louis. There were 7 of us. Toshiko was born and died as an infant, or the 4th child. My father was about 42 years old, and he was a Japanese immigrant. So was my mom.
How did you meet your mom?
Picture bride. He picked her up in Seattle.
What do you mean picture bride?
The family got the family of my father and mother got together and said, "Hi, my father needed to get married," and so they sent him a picture of the bride that he's gonna get. He was supposed to get an older sister, but my mother says she'll volunteer to become the bride. So they established a Ducan, which is a boarding house at 527 M Street. And so we lived there for all these years. My brother finally ended up going to med school, and then the war, the Pearl Harbor thing started, and so we were all, in a couple of months, were directed to pack our bag and leave to Walerga
Tell us a little bit more about that, how that went about.
concentration camp. Of course, when Pearl Harbor was bombed, we didn't know what to do. We didn't think anything would really happen. But the dictation, the mandate said we had to leave in a couple of months, and with only what we can hold in our hands. And my brother, second brother, was in the Coast Guard, National Guard, so he was not going to camp. But the rest of four of us went on to camp, in the first to a relocation assembly center camp, and which was a temporary, it looked like just like a army place with wood buildings and all that kind of stuff. Barracks is what it was. And then before we left, it's right here. Or right there.
You go ahead, keep talking, Mom.
And forgot where, before we went to camp, we had to get rid of everything. And my piano, my one little big old nice piano, was sold for $25. A white couple came and paid $25 for my piano. And we didn't have anything to do with the 427 M Street boarding house, because my mother and father were not allowed to own anything, so we were renting from a famous guy, judge named Glenn. Judge Glenn had offered the rental house. And the boarding house that my father and mother lived were usually rented and boarded by the people that are from the same kind of prefecture. My father and mother was from Kanagawa-ken, Kanao, Japan. And so most of the friends that were in our boarding house were families or relatives or something like that. Anyway, we all went to camp.
Concentration camp.
There's an assembly camp, which was a temporary camp, which was just under small version.
How old were you, and how did it impact your family?
So my sister must have been 16, and I must have been 12 or something, or maybe older. Oh, well, maybe older. Yeah, it was 1942. So,
About 13.
yeah. So anyway, we went. After that, we went to internment camp, which was in the border of a place called Tule Lake, which was the border of Oregon and California. And that was where and I was going to high school the second year. All of us went to Lincoln Elementary School. And then when we went on to high school, the first year of high school was at Lincoln Junior High. And then the high school that we went to, Sacramento High School, I went and spent sophomore year there. And then we went on to Tule Lake, and I spent what's after sophomore? Junior year. And all of our teachers were white that apparently they volunteered or something, and they were all white teachers. And then after
How are the conditions there?
it was just like any army barrack. There was a sentry looking over high above us, and we couldn't escape if we wanted to because he had a gun directed toward us.
Did anybody rebel, or were there any rebellions to
A
that?
few of them did rebel. In fact,
They
there
sent
were
them
about
out.
4 of them that never went to camp, and they were put in prison, and so they became famous though because they objected to the ouster. But the JACL was very instrumental in encouraging us to go ahead. You had no recourse but to go on to camp and walk, be very pacifist about it and all that stuff. And so my 4 years of high school was spent in 4 different areas, and but we had a good time. We were teenagers. We had dances in the weekends. We had music lessons. Anybody wanted to learn how to play the guitar was given lessons. So as a young person, we were having a ball. The only thing is that we had to go like any soldier to the mess hall and get our food, and we didn't eat any. Did they give us a lot of rice? Nah, they gave us a lot of pork and things that we never eat, and all that kind of stuff. And they were.
Your father was there?
My father was dead. Oh, I forgot to say that. My father was gone. He had died when he was 62 in 1939. So when the war began, it was like in the 40s.
Oh, so that's when you were 13. You were probably more like
Yeah.
14 or 15 when you went to
Yeah,
camp.
that's right. I was 13. And so, so it was for people who needed privacy and everything. They didn't get any privacy because we were all in barracks. And the latrine was outside. You had to go to the bathroom, just like any soldier would probably be able to.
A lot of people lose a lot of personal wealth when they return, farmland.
Oh, they gave up everything, and we had personal things that we asked the church, Baptist church, to store some of these things, and so we as church members, many church people gave their precious things, in with the church people. Of course, we found out that some people that came back to retrieve their things, they had either been stolen or deteriorated or something. Anyway, it wasn't the same at all. But anyway, that was in Tule Lake in California, which was cold and snowy at times. And my mother worked and volunteered, I think, in the mess hall, and no family could ever eat together like they used to in the old days. They came when they got ready, and some of them.
And weren't some of your brothers actually fighting the war for the United States, where you were put in camp because they thought you were traitors?
Well, that's an interesting thing because Hilo was a National Guard, and I think he might have been the first or second Japanese American to be part of a National Guard group. And my brother Amasa was on his internship, and so he was the first one to go to camp because they were setting up medical hospitals and schools and all those, and carpenters and people like that who needed to set up the camps for the 120,000 going to Tule Lake. And so that was our and we met a lot of
Well, I thought one of your brothers were in the 105th Division, which was a Japanese-American division.
I don't know if my 2 brothers, Joe and Louis, were in the 100th Infantry or not. I can't remember.
Oh, maybe, okay.
Yeah, I don't think they were in the 442nd, the famous 442nd.
Oh, 12th, okay.
And all that kind of stuff. And so, at that stage, then this question of loyalty and disloyalty came up in our questionnaire, and a lot of the people signed they were going to always be loyal to the United States, and which was kind of stupid because they were in camp and they, you know, and they're incarcerated and everything, and they still wanted to be faithful to, loyal to the United States, which so they were sent into different camps. There were 10 camps. They were all sent to different camps. The ones that were loyal, the ones that were disloyal, that they had signed no or something, they were left in Tule Lake, and so all the disloyal people were put in. They were stayed in Tule Lake, yeah. And so this is gonna be long.
That's all right. We got 49 more minutes. So.
And so anyway,
It looks like it still hurts you a little bit.
yeah.
Still hurts. I mean,
My sister was a stalwart person. She made decisions for all of us, and you know, she held the family together. And a lot of just married couples could not get any kind of a privacy because they were all in, you know, in the same room.
you didn't have private rooms at all.
And so I'm sure they suffered. But anyway, so we decided to go to Arkansas. The disloyalty people, the ones that were loyal were sent to different camps. And we went with the Japanese Baptist church group, and they all decided to go to Arkansas.
So you were loyals?
Huh?
You were loyals?
Yeah, we were loyal. We didn't know.
You're American. You're born here. Yeah, okay.
So, so anyway.
They kept the dissidents at Tule Lake.
Right.
Okay.
And anybody that made trouble, they were sent over there. So they had a gangster-like place.
I read that in Daniel Steele's book, Silent Honor.
Oh, yeah? That's interesting. But anyway, we were in Arkansas, and Arkansas was a whole different kind of weather. It was so dry, lots and lots of insects. Ooh, we didn't know what chiggers were until they got on.
Chiggers? I thought that was Chinese and black.
Oh. That's a good one. That's a good one. But anyway, I spent my senior year in high school in Arkansas, and the day that they gave out their high school diploma, my brother Louis came and picked us up and said, "Let's go to Chicago." And Louis and my brother Joe were already in Chicago with a group of young fellows. They had put up a place to stay in. And Louis and Harlow found us a place to stay in Chicago. And so my sister and I and my mother stayed in Chicago, 2656 West Washington Boulevard, Chicago. And my sister joined the nurses cadet corps, except she was down somewhere in Illinois. She caught a undulant fever, they called it, for drinking pasteurized milk. Her buddy that they were both together in the nurses corps. She invited my sister Ann to visit them, and so she drank this undulant, milk, unpasteurized milk, and got sick, so she had to quit. Anyway, Chicago was one big place. Scary, noisy, nasty people, rude, they didn't know how to talk, but so it was a whole new atmosphere. I couldn't get used to it for a while anyway. But after a while, we had a ball. We had stage plays, a lot of dancing, all kind of entertainment for young people, and we had a good time. Met some guys, and but Doris Soroka, my girlfriend, said, "We're getting restless around here. Let's move to Los Angeles." So in 1948, Doris and I took a train and went to Los Angeles, where Doris's girlfriend, Buddy, was a renter. She owned an apartment place. So we stayed there for a while, and we had a good time there. And I got a new job. But in Chicago, they gave me a job as a key punch operator. They trained me, and I was really good.
Who trained you?
Sally Spiegel's Incorporated. It's a company, and they needed bodies, during the war. And so they trained me to be a key punch operator, and I was good. And so when the boss moved to Henry C. Litton's company in Chicago, he asked me if I would want to apply for a job over there because I was good. So I was flattered, and I got a job there, and they taught me how to make up because there was a department store. And even if you weren't a cashier or anything, or sales lady, you had to take these courses on how to, how to make up and do all that, dress up. And that in those days we were not allowed to wear pants. It was no good. But anyway, we got tired and we went to Los Angeles and stayed there a year, and found out my mother and my sister and everybody was back in Sacramento. So I wanted to go back to Sacramento. That's when I came back to Sacramento, and I stayed with a few women that they were housekeeping. And I got a job there with the Department of Motor Vehicle, and ended up eventually being a acting supervisor for a section there. So then I think I met Elbert then. I joined the Baptist church again, the Japanese Baptist church, and his brother Louis were instrumental in getting us together, and we got married, and then we got you guys. We got Sherry, Nanette, and then I quit my motor vehicle job for a couple of years, and then I went back part-time.
Sherry was a twin, huh?
Oh, that's right. And I was huge. And the first baby was born in the elevator and didn't survive, but Sherry did. 6 weeks. I guess it was 6 weeks. So anyway, that's about what happened. And
How did your family feel about you marrying outside of your race?
Yeah, I was just gonna say that my mother said, "Leave town." She says, you can't get. He's not your race and everything. And some of the church people were real supportive. But when we got married at the chapel, Henry was the best man. Louis married us. Ella played the organ, and Janice was the best woman, I guess, first or whatever.
Did any of your family come?
And then I invited them to come, and the only person that peeked through that chapel door was my brother Masa and Daisy. That's all there was, and we had a couple of friends. George Mordell and his wife came. Yeah, and my roommates, a couple of them that I stayed with, they came. But that was about it. And so that was
They kind of ostracized you there for a while?
no, they liked him better than I did. He was involved in the
You didn't like him when you married him?
he was involved in the JACL, and he was active. Yeah.
Why is the black man involved in the Japanese group?
Because he knew so many Japanese guys, and he went around with this Japanese nurse,
Oh, he didn't say that.
Yeah. and she got married to someone.
What made you decide to go out with him?
I don't know. I guess I was at loose ends. I had given up coming from Los Angeles, gave up all my boyfriends and all that kind of stuff. And there weren't anybody. Oh, and I did go with a couple of people, but, they weren't. But somehow we met, we connected. And that's the end of my story.
What was some of your best memories as a child and as an adult? Like the highlights of your life. What are some of the highlights of your life?
The most, I really enjoyed my father. He was a recruiter. He would recruit people to work in the farms for the farmers. And so I saw him only in wintertime. Summertime he was busy. So when I saw him in wintertime, he would take me for walks. I never forgot those walks. And he would just take me all over the place, anywhere. even the saloon, you know, and it was something that I really, really treasured. And he talked more than my mother. I wish my mother had talked a lot more about our, you know, family life and all that.
Her mother was a music teacher?
Who?
Your mother's mother.
My mother? No.
Her mother. What was her? She never talked about your grandparents at all? Or?
That's one of the things that our generation of Japanese Americans
Immigrants.
didn't see their parents, grandparents, because they were never, unless they came from, you know.
The Issei, huh?
Yeah,
the first generation. Huh?
Yeah, we're the Nisei. My mother and father were the Issei. But the ones that were the grandparents that were in Japan were just grandparents, Oji-san, Ba-san, you know.
And they didn't talk about that
So,
much?
not much. And if they did, I don't remember.
What were some of the hardest times you had as a child?
I can't remember too much.
Talk about some of your greatest joys in adulthood.
After Elbert and I got married, we had a lot of adjustment to do. I was very immature. I didn't know too much about kids. I never babysat any young kids, so I didn't know too much about children. But I learned, and Elbert helped me too. And we both weren't too good with children, but fortunately our kids survived our inept disciplines and things like that. My mother always used to come and babysat for us, but one of the things that I always laugh about my mother, it was when Sherry said, "Come on, Grandma, I'll show you. And my mother would grab the decanter of soy sauce and say, here you are, Sherry. Here's your show you." And Sherry would say, "No, I want to show you. Come and see what I did. I want to show you." And so those are the language barriers we had to go through a whole lot. And one of the things that was kind of exciting to me was to be married to another race, because we always got some attention and reaction from people. Most people that I met with Elbert was, "Oh, you're a war bride. You came from Japan. You didn't think I knew how to speak English." And we would be shopping, and the cashier would say, "Okay, next." And I have to say, we're together. We're not separate purchases. And so that was kind of fun. And the other thing was just being married to another race was kind of fun. It was really, really fun. And
So do you feel like a black person or a Japanese person after all these years?
I know that was funny, but we always got reaction. Even now we get reaction, especially from people who've been in Japan, and they swear I'm from Japan, a war bride or something, you know. And so it's been, but being a mixed race I find it very exciting. And
You're mixed race?
not me, no,
you are now.
My children. And you know, I did that last night. I did the same thing. I said, "Oh, I forgot
You feel like a mixed race, blended."
I feel like I'm mixed. But anyway.
So what would you advise young people for long marriages and raising kids? And
I think one of the hardest things for Elbert and I were communicating. You know, we all. I'm set in my way, believe it or not, but I have certain definite ideas about certain things, and so did Elbert. And for instance, well, I can't recall any examples, but
I heard you left him once when he was building that apartment house.
yeah, well, that was one of the things. The low point in our life was when he was 24 hours a day he was working on the apartment house. And I didn't see him, and the children were real tiny then. And so I needed help. I was tired, but he was tired too. So it was, so Doris was, my buddy said, "I'm flying. Why don't you?" So I took Sherry and went with Doris on the plane, and we made it and came back and refreshed and happy. But those were the good old days.
What do you think about your grandkids?
Well, that's one of the big highlights. I can't believe, because I was telling on this thing that we did not know too much about kids. And to have you guys, you and grandchildren, and Sherry and Gore, turned out so well, it's amazing, because we did not know anything. We didn't really believe in spanking, but we do, and all that kind of stuff. And I would read books on how to raise kids, and forget it, But it was good. It was a good day. It was a good, so. And one of the things about East Palo Alto is the weather. But more than that, there are 4 F's that I was appreciative of. And that's family, friend. What was the 4th one? Volunteer at the Kaiser, info desk, but I think it should be more active kind of volunteering, like
Audubon schools, you've done all that.
That. But anyway, more active kind of a volunteer, be right in there and say, you guys better behave and stop taking drugs if you're going to, become one of the healthy people and spiritually healthy and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, my volunteers have been mostly passive kind of thing, because that's the way I am. And so, get hang in there. But whatever. And thanks to our friend, and family, I'm able to maintain a sense of spirituality and strength that I don't think I would have been able to have without our friends, family, and even foes made me stronger. So that's all I can say for now. I'll probably think of all kind of stuff I could.
You seem like you always find a positive side to people.
Well, I do.
And you seem to always have a little joy in your heart almost every day.
Oh, yeah.
Where do you get that from?
I don't know. I think about my mother all the time. She's very stoic, but she was very involved in the singing, group singers, and the okibana, the flower arrangement kind of thing, and again, it's the kind of stay, not strong, but kind of.
She was a happy, peaceful person?
Yeah, it's a kind of a peaceful kind of a project she used to have. And when I think about my mother, I think, but she had her days when my 2 brothers were growing up. My mother would give them a cue, put a mound of something and put a flame on it to keep them to discipline them. And that was nasty and hot.
Kind of burn them, huh?
Yeah. So, she had her days, I guess. And I had my days when I used to spank the heck out of you guys. My Sherry used to get it.
Yeah, Sherry.
And now I said, no, you don't do that to kids. So anyway, whatever. You want me to read something?
What was your biggest challenge in life, you think? The biggest thing you had to overcome?
Getting along with Dad. Yeah, lazy.
He said you had no problems.
Shoot,
He said it was easy.
yeah, I went along with everything, so, yeah.
And what was your biggest joy in life, looking back?
Being with Dad, it's been one big happy kind of thing, you know, off and on.
How does it feel to be 79 years old? What do you think about growing older? And
I'm not, you know, the golden years or something else, right? It was supposed to make us relax and happy and everything, but Dad and I both agree that it's not all that big deal. Especially when you hear about this, I talk about this lady that came out of Kaiser's elevator carrying a bottle, and she said, "You talk about the golden years," and she said, "This is my husband's urine. That's the golden years," and she said it all in front of all these people. But anyway, we've been one big happy family, though. We've been lucky. Okay, that's all we can tell.